So last week, as you guys already noted, we started looking at the 4 possibilities for what explains reality, okay? Because we said first, we start with us, right? The little box I drew at the beginning of last lesson. We start with us. We realize that we live in a world that's ordered, that's got structure, that has rules and laws, but the world doesn't explain itself. It merely describes itself, okay? So we're looking for what's the sufficient reason for why the world is here. And a sufficient reason is a reason that does not need any further reasons, right? So what is the reason, the ultimate reason why reality is here and why reality is the way that it is? And so we said there's 4 possibilities. We said reality is an illusion, but then we've already gone over why that doesn't make any sense. We said reality is self-created, but that's a contradiction. It's a logical impossibility. And so we ended last week's lesson by saying if anything exists, something must self-exist, okay? This leaves us with the 2 options. Either reality itself is self-existent, or it was created by a being who is self-existent, okay? So either way, we're stuck with self-existence. And these are the 2 strongest claims. Obviously, we're going to say this one's the correct one. This is obviously the one that points to God. But of the 3, this one's definitely the strongest claim. Okay, but it does still have holes in it. Okay, so let's start with that. Reality is self-existent. First off, what does it even mean for something to be self-existent? Like, if you heard that phrase, what would you say it means?
It makes itself exist.
It makes itself, okay, true. But what does that mean? Does that mean it creates itself?
No.
It doesn't create itself. Yes, it has no beginning, okay? Beth, were you going to say anything else? So it has no beginning, right? There was never a time when it was not. It has always been there, right? It has, Stacy, you are actually right. It has the power of existence within itself, right? Nothing had to bring it into existence. It exists upon its own strength, right? So in biblical terms, we could say it is eternal. Right, eternal in both directions. Because we could say we are eternal in a sense that we continue in some state of existence on into eternity, but we have a beginning, right? Something that is self-existent has no beginning and no end, right? They are eternal. Right? Eternal means to exist forever without end, right? And this is when eternality is paired with infinity, right? When you have no beginning or end on either side of you. Right, God is totally outside the bounds of time. But beyond time, though, a self-existent entity is not dependent or bound by anything else. Okay? It needs nothing to be sustained. It does not need food, water, clothing, shelter, sunlight, anything. It needs nothing to exist because it is the source of all existence. It has the power to exist within itself. Okay? We require a cause to bring us into existence from a material perspective, right? We require sustenance to continue our existence, right? We require food and water to keep our physical existence at least going, okay? But a self-existent entity does not need a cause. It is the cause of everything. It is the uncaused cause, right? If you remember a couple lessons back, we talked about that, okay? And so this means that everything falls into 2 categories. Anything that exists must either be self-existent or was created by something self-existent ultimately, right? Obviously, you could say, like, we are created by beings who were created by other beings who were created by other beings. But you go back far enough, we're created by something self-existent, okay? Everything that exists falls into one of those 2 categories, okay? Now, reality logically requires self-existence at some point, right? That's the conclusion we have come to now. We've eliminated illusion. We've eliminated the idea of self-creation. Okay, so that means we are logically and philosophically required to affirm self-existence. There is no other alternative. Okay, self-existence is a real thing. We already know this because we've eliminated the other 2 options. Okay, so either reality itself is self-existent or something that is self-existent made our reality. Those are our 2 options, right? So let's start with reality as being self-existent. Can the universe be self-existent? So this is far from a new idea. Okay? Many of the ancient Greeks posited that the universe has just always existed without a true beginning, right? It's just kind of always been here, in some form. And so aside from theism, like I said, this view makes the most sense, but it still fails to answer our question about reality. Okay? First off, when someone says the universe is self-existent, you should first ask, what do they mean by the universe? What is the universe? What do you define as the universe? Period. Everything known. So does the universe expand as our knowledge expands then?
Well, I mean, from my, am I supposed to have non-biased worldview about this question?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so from my worldview, I would say that the universe does expanding from God created. Verses in the Bible that say that, or hint towards that, right? But I mean, I guess you could say, from a off the side perspective, maybe that it grows.
So I don't think you're necessarily wrong. The reason I challenge that is because you said everything known. It's okay, well then, if we discover a new planet, was that not part of the universe until we?
That adds to our knowledge.
Okay, so all right, good. Ryan.
Every physical thing that is here.
Okay, every physical thing. All right. Gravity is not really a physical thing. It's a force produced by other physical things. Zeke, did you have some? Oh, Josh.
I would say everything with God and heaven. Maybe not heaven, but those being the exception.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, right. As Christians, we acknowledge the spiritual dimension as well, right? But right now we are kind of just thinking about the material world, which you could say the material universe, right, is what the universe is, right? Most people could use universe as a shorthanded way of saying everything that exists. Again, like you said, apart from God, right? Most people would exclude that. But you could even say that. If you just define the universe as everything that exists, then God would be included in that. So when you say that the universe is self-existent, that's literally the least specific statement you could make on the issue, right? Because you're saying everything is self-existent. If the universe is everything and it's self-existent, everything is self-existent. That's what you're saying, okay? And everyone agrees the universe is diverse. Okay, it's full of stars, planets, moons. Even just on Earth, we have water, air, land, rocks, grass, mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians, bugs, bacteria, and humans, right? We have so many different things, even just on this planet, but let alone all the other planets and moons and stars that are out there, right? And we also have things that humans create, like buildings and roads and clothes and instruments and tools, right? So out of all of that, which part of it is self-existent? Out of everything, all the diversity that's in the universe, if we're saying the universe is self-existent, which part of it is self-existent? What was that? So you say all of it is self-existent, but we clearly see things fade away or come into existence, right, Josh?
I mean, you could just say any of it. Any portion of it could have been around in the beginning. Or any portion of it,
Any portion of it.
Yeah. Especially if you're willing to believe billions of years or whatever, you can just make up whatever.
Okay. See?
It's all existing at the beginning, it's just being changed.
Okay, it's just, so what is it though? You said it's being changed. What is the it? Who said it? What'd you say? Matter, right? That's typically what you're going to hear someone say. They'll say matter. Matter is what makes it the universe. And that is true, right? Stuff, the things you can, touch, That's matter. That's what makes it the universe, right? Space, time, and matter. Those are kind of the three essential elements of the universe. Time and space are immaterial, right? So that's matter. Matter is the thing. That's what the stuff of the universe is. Okay? So the basis of the universe is matter. Matter is the category where all physical material is placed. All right? All the stuff in the universe is made up of matter. Everything that's made, whether it's a dry erase marker, whether it's a skyscraper, whether it's a nuclear power plant, or even a human being, is created out of matter that currently exists. Like Zeke said, it's being changed over time, but the matter currently exists. Okay? Matter is mutable, as we would say. Right? Mutable means it changes, or it can change at least. All right? So while they'll say, well, no individual thing, right? No individual person, no individual planet, no individual moon is eternal in and of itself. They're all made of matter, which is eternal. Okay, I'm following this line of argument. And this is often posited as why the Big Bang Theory makes sense. And I'm just going to take the Big Bang Theory as the beginning of the universe example that most people would assign to it. There's different ones, of course. That's the most popular one, though. We're going to go with that. I'm not saying that's true, by the way, though I think you actually can square it with the 6-day reading of Genesis 1. But this is often posited as why the Big Bang makes sense, right? It's obviously absurd to say that the material for the Big Bang just appeared out of nothing and then caused the Big Bang, right? Because the Big Bang's, the theory behind it is that there's this point of singularity, right? There's something there, there's some matter there, and it explodes and eventually creates the universe, right? And that kind of sets everything in motion, okay? But if that material had always existed, then it seems plausible that eventually interacted with itself in just the right way to cause the Big Bang and thus give birth to the universe, right? So now we actually have circumstances in which case we could say, oh, well, give it enough time and it might do this, right? It's not saying nothing exists. The theory, there's one major issue with this theory, and that's the theory requires the matter to interact with itself, okay? AKA the matter must move. How does matter move? How do things move? Yes.
They have a force that moves them.
They have a force that moves them. Correct. Right. Does anyone know what that law is called? Yes.
I don't remember exactly what it's called, but basically, it's kind of emotional, state of emotionless, not right over.
Yes, and it is called the law of inertia. That is correct. Very good. Yeah, the law of inertia. I forget which law of the thermodynamics that is, but it is the law of inertia. I can't remember if it's the second one or not. I was never that great at science, but I can at least understand this. So yeah, the law of inertia states that things at rest stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force, right? So, and this ping pong paddle will stay there unless some force acts upon it, unless someone goes and picks it up, unless the table collapses, unless the building collapses, unless it's hit by a missile or something, right? It's gonna stay right there until the wood degrades into pulp and then goes back to Mother Earth or whatever, right? That's what's going to happen. It's not going to move. And I just moved it.
It just didn't move. Magic!
Anyway, it didn't move itself, though. I moved it, right? So matter cannot move itself. It requires something to act upon it. The Big Bang, if we're just going with the fact, if we're just going to say matter is self-existent and all matter that currently existed in that thing that made the Big Bang, right? The Big Bang would require something to act upon the material so that they would interact with each other in order to cause the explosion. But if all that exists is matter, what could cause it to move? Who moved the matter, right? That's the major hole in this. Who or what moved the matter that caused it to be interacting with itself and eventually blow up and make the universe, right? So again, if you're going to say, well, matter is self-existent, okay, well then how did the matter start moving around to make all the stuff that's here, to set everything in motion? Matter doesn't move itself. It requires something else to move it, okay? Now, a possible explanation people will give for this is they'll say, well, maybe there's a higher kind of matter, They'll say, what if an energy-producing material caused the Big Bang and all the matter that's derived from it? Meaning that whatever matter was in the Big Bang bomb, right? Whatever they want to call it, I don't know. Whatever matter was there, this matter is different or transcendent from the matter that we can interact with now, or the matter that we ourselves are even made up of. They'll say this matter was able to produce its own energy. Yes, Beth?
At that point, why don't you just believe in God?
Stop. Stop, you're getting ahead of me.
But also the other law of thermodynamics, right?
Which is?
Matter is neither created nor destroyed.
Right, but we're saying how did the matter get here in the first place?
Right, but if there was a higher form of matter.
Well, I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to how this is spelled out. Right, because I'll say, so this matter, because it's energy producing, right? It can produce energy is motion, right? So now the matter can move and it can cause the Big Bang and boom, everything's made, right? And all the matter that we interact with now is just kind of derived from this higher form of matter, right? So the fact that our bodies, they're made up of matter, but they will decay away into something else. Yeah, that matter is still going to live on, but it's obviously degraded from this current form, okay? So this kind of matter, a materialist would say, is the self-existent part of the universe, right? This higher kind of matter, that's the self-existent portion, right? It possessed the power of existence within itself, and then it gave rise to all the forms of matter that are lesser than, okay? This material still exists, like I said, but it's on such a small scale that it's practically invisible, but it's pulsating throughout the whole universe, right? In other words, this material would transcend the rest of the universe, right? Let's say it does not need anything to exist outside of itself, and it gives rise to everything else, right? While it could exist within what we would call the universe, it is a higher kind of existence, right? It wouldn't depend on anything else, right? It wouldn't need anything else. So we have a transcendent, self-existing material that created all things. And like Bethel said, this material would essentially be God. Now, we don't have all the pieces of what we would call the Christian God, but we have, building blocks that align with it. Yes, see?
I think these guys are onto something.
Like I saw this scientists discover God.
Right. So again, this is where they would have to run to, because if they just say, well, it's like the matter that we interact with now, it's like, okay, well, you could, it can be very, what's the word? Appealing to say, oh, okay, I see that matter, convincing. It can be very convincing to say, oh yeah, I see that matter is neither created nor destroyed, right? So yeah, maybe matter could exist forever. Okay, but how did the matter start moving to start making stuff? Right? How did it start making things? Right? Even if it existed, it would have just existed as this block forever, because nothing would have acted on it. Okay? So yeah, the only place you could run to is to say, well, there's this higher kind of matter that can produce its own energy and that would be self-existent and transcends the rest of the physical world. Okay, well, now you are basically just saying that's God, right? If you disagree with that, you're simply arguing over a name. That's all you're doing at that point. You're just saying, well, but I just wouldn't want to call it God. Okay, well, you have to call it something, right? You have to call it something. Perhaps they could call it the necessary being, which is what option 4 is. And so now we've come to the last of the possibilities. What is it, Ryan?
I thought I heard you say the necessary beating.
Necessary beating. Sometimes those are necessary.
I was like, that's not the right word to use.
Yeah. So this brings us to the final and only logical option, which is a necessary being. Being, Ryan. Right? The universe required a self-existent being to create it. Right? Some higher being that possessed the power of existence on its own gave rise to all that we see around us. Okay? This being is transcendent. Now, transcendence is often framed as God exists outside of the universe, and you can talk about it in that way too. But that almost limits it to just talking about location, And it's not like we're saying God exists in this other location apart from the universe. We're saying God is a higher order of being. That's what transcendent means, right? He transcends any category that we have here to measure him by, right? He transcends time, he transcends matter, he transcends space, right? All those things flow out of him. He is not bound to them. Now, he can enter into them like he did primarily in the incarnation of Christ, but he is not bound by them. Okay? We see this in Acts 17:28 when Paul says, quoting a Greek philosopher or Greek poet, he says, "In him we live and move and have our being." And he says that's true. Right? So what that's saying is God actively keeps the universe moving. Right? He did not just make it and then have it go run on its own. Right? He is the one that is actively still moving it. Now, the way that manifests itself is through things like gravity or gravitational pulls or magnetic fields, right? There's a physical manifestation of God doing this, but it's still him doing it, right? He is not limited to the universe as pantheists will claim, right? Pantheists meaning that God is everything. God is the universe, that he is the stuff, right? No, he exists above and beyond the universe while still never being absent from it, right? I think I forgot to put this up. God exists beyond the universe while still interacting with it. Okay? We've already noted that if anything exists, something must self-exist. Okay? But now that we've eliminated the possibility of reality being self-existent on its own, we can confidently say that if anything exists, then God exists. That is a logical necessity now. Doesn't matter what you feel about it. If anything exists, if you exist, if this floor exists, if this building exists, if this planet exists, God exists. It requires it. It is necessary. Okay? Sometimes you'll hear phrases like this or similar to this just said, like out of context. And the point of it is to kind of be shocking and provocative to kind of get people talking. But this is the logical train that you go down to get here, right? You eliminate all the other options and say, God is the only logical option for why things exist. Unless you just want to go with the absurdist route and say nothing actually exists. Okay, but you don't live like that. And also you're abandoning all rationality and logic at that point, right? If you want to hold on to any of them, you have to say God exists. And we see this in Scripture. Can anyone think of the passage that would describe God in this way of being the foundation of all existence?
John 11:1.
That is one of them. There are two passages. John 1:1 is one of them, right? In the beginning was the Word. What's the other one? Oh my gosh, that's it too.
It's too late. It's really probably.
What's the other passage?
Would it be Genesis 1:1?
No, not Genesis 1:1. There's another part where God says who he is to someone.
Man, that's like, wait, I am.
You were so close.
I am who I am.
Yes, the I am statement, right? The I am statement, right? Exodus 3:14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Okay? So Scripture backs up this claim when God reveals his name to Moses. He says, I am. That is how he defines himself. And there's many aspects to this identification. First, it shows the infinite nature of God. God is so much higher than us that we cannot fully bind him into any words in all the languages on the earth. You could take every word from every human language currently or formerly or that will ever futurely, if that's a word, exist. Put them all together, none of them would be able to encapsulate God, right? When we use the phrase, which I know God's the one that uses it, but he's still speaking this in human language that we can understand. When he uses the phrase I am, when we use the phrase I am, we follow with an identifying word. I am Edward. I am a Christian. I am an American. I am a son, right? These identifying markers, right? But God cannot be defined by anything because he created all things. Now, again, you go back to the analogical language, we can still speak about God, but even the words that we speak about God, we realize are analogous. They're not fully capturing everything God is, but they are still speaking something true about it in ways we can understand. Okay? So when God calls himself I am, he is declaring that he is the foundation of all existence. Right? Another way of saying I am is he is. Right? He is existence itself. Everything else flows from him and is defined to either be in alignment with him or in rebellion against him. He's the standard. He's the foundation. He's the cornerstone. Right? Everything's based off of him, based in relation to him. And we see this again, like Bethel said, in the New Testament, when John calls Jesus the Word, or, does anyone know what the word for word is in Greek? The Logos, right? It's right up there on the wall, right? The Logos, right? In Greek philosophy, the Logos was the logic of the universe, the answer to why reality exists. Now, they didn't know particularly what it was, right? It was still kind of a mystery to them, but they said, look, there has to be something out there that explains reality, so we're going to just call it the logic of the universe, right? That's just kind of the name they gave to this vague force out there, right? This thing out there that caused everything else to be. They didn't know what to call it, so they just said, we're just going to call it the Logos, right? The logic of the universe, right? And it's the Christian religion that came in and said, we actually know who this Logos is. And it's not just this force out here, it's a person, and this person's name is Jesus Christ. Now, we've gotten to this point. Oh, my bad. We've gotten to this point. Even though we've proven the necessity of God, we cannot yet say with certainty that this must be the God of Christianity. Okay? We only know that there is a self-existent, transcendent creator of the universe, which we can call God. Okay? So this brings us to theism. Theism just meaning you believe in God, a God, right? Not tying it to any particular religion or worldview. You just believe that there is God. You could also call it classical theism, which would go back to like Aristotle, yes?
Or multiple gods.
Well, multiple gods would throw a wrench in this, because the traditional way of viewing multiple gods is you have gods for each thing, right? And even a lot of those religions would have one god overarching, right? Or something outside which the gods live in. And you have to explain that. Yeah, multiple gods would be very hard to square with this.
Unless they made a new one.
They just made a new
pantheon.
Yeah, I suppose so. But you could even square that Eastern way of thinking with Christianity by just saying all those gods are demons, which is what Justin Martyr did, who was the first Christian apologist. So this is all we know, right? We know that there's this being out there we can call God. And that brings us to theism, but that alone is not sufficient proof of the Christian faith. It's sufficient proof that God exists, but it's not sufficient proof of the Christian faith. Okay? And this is where a lot of people can get stuck in apologetics. They can get to this point, but it's the leap between philosophy and Christianity that's the hardest one for people to make. It's like, I can get them to admit there's God, and I could even get them to see the consistency of Scripture and how it's, prophetic, and how it's true, and how it's it's historically verifiable. It's bridging that gap that's the hardest part. But I'm going to give it my best swing. So philosophy can bring us to the point of there being a God, but how do we make that leap from philosophy to Christianity? First, we should ask the question, is this God personal? The main contention between philosophy's God, which by philosophy's God, I'm primarily just talking about like Aristotle's view of God, that's typically seen as the classical theistic view of God. The main contention between that and Christianity's God has to do with whether or not God is personal in nature, right? Meaning he has a personality. He thinks, he does things, he desires things, right? He is personal. So Aristotle said that God I'm kind of even using little g here, God, is creator of all, but he did not create with any intention. In fact, it may even be wrong to speak of God using a personal pronoun like he, because this God is not personal, right? It's more of a creating force almost, right? A force is not personal and therefore would not be the God of the Bible, who's so personal that he exists in three persons. Okay, so philosophy's God may create unintentionally, right? Some who hold this view state that God creates necessarily, meaning that it is just a part of his nature. He must create. Things must flow from him, okay? Meaning it simply creates because it naturally does that, like how we naturally breathe, right? However, this would mean that the universe would be just as eternal as God is, and we would end up with pantheism, where there is no distinction between God and the world, right? Because if you're just going to say that God necessarily creates, then that must mean God must have been creating for his entire existence, which is forever, right? Eternity, which means that the world had to have existed for that same amount of time. So now there's no difference between us and God. There's no difference between the universe and God. And as spiritual as that may sound, no one lives as though there is no distinction between anything. Because the pantheistic view, when you boil it down, says everything is the same, right? That distinctions are an illusion, right? Just go read Eastern religions. This is what they teach, right? Distinction is an illusion, right? We're all one. Well, if we're all one, then why do you care if I'm a Christian and you're a Hindu, or I'm a Christian and you're a Buddhist? Those distinctions are just going to be melted away at some point, right? But we don't live that way. We know there are distinctions. And this would bring us back to the problem of a self-existent universe, right? Because we have to say the universe has just existed as long as God has existed, which is forever, in which case, what's the difference between the two? Okay? So where both philosophy and Christianity agree is that God is the only explanation for the way the universe is, or God is the only explanation for the design of the universe. And they would say the universe absolutely bears the marks of design and order, right? Like we said, there's those 4 laws of reality. There's no way around them. There is no other rational explanation for why reality is the way that it is. Order cannot be explained by disorder. Consistency cannot be explained by chaos. The testimony of nature sings that there is a designer, just as a painting declares that there is a painter. Okay? Now, if we're going to say that the world is designed, that it bears the marks of design, and that there is a designer, design requires intention. Okay? Nothing can be designed without a purpose or without a desire in the one who is designing it, right? Go home and just think of anything, write it down in an idea journal or something, or draw it out, right? You're drawing it out with some kind of intention, right? Whether it's a t-shirt design or a design for like some contraption or model or something, like there is intention behind it. You're putting thought into it. You're deciding why things are the way they are, right? You cannot do that unintentionally.
Well, you at the very least decided to make something.
Yeah, even if you're going to go home and just scribble on a paper, you're still deciding to intentionally scribble on the paper.
You could be sleepwalking and doing that.
What?
You could be sleepwalking and doing that.
Oh no, I accidentally built a car in my sleep.
Oh, no, yes, I hate when that happens.
Yeah, I have 20 cars at home.
But saying that something was designed unintentionally is essentially the same as saying it was done by accident, right? Which that's what that would be, right? If you did it in your sleepwalk, it would be an accident, essentially. Okay? If we admit that the universe has the characteristics of design, then we must admit that it was crafted by an intentional designer. And intention is a characteristic of personality. This is because intention is derived from desire. We desire something, so we create it with the intention of making it according to our desires. So if we admit that God created nature, that nature is designed, that design requires intention, and that intention is tied to personality, we must admit that God is personal. Right? We must admit God is personal. Because now, it's not as though just the world just emanates from God and he has no say in it. No. If the world cannot be if the world cannot be self-existent, which we already said, that means God at some point had to decide to make the world. which means that he chose to do it, which is a mark of personality. So this takes us out of the realm of strict philosophy and leads us into religion. Okay? And in this realm of religion, Christianity is the only option. I'm going to spell out why here in a second, but Christianity is the only option. If we examine the religions of the world in light of the philosophical journey we've been through, Trinitarian Christianity is the only option for a religion that makes sense of the world. This is going to be a very broad overview, but I believe my reasoning is strong here. So we've come to the point where our only option is a personal, transcendent creator God. So this eliminates all polytheism and virtually all Eastern religions, right? It eliminates Buddhism. Buddhism is not even polytheistic. Buddhism is atheistic. It does not believe in a God. It believes in a force, right? So it eliminates virtually all Eastern religions, okay? Only monotheism, meaning the belief in one God, has a singular personal God, which is what we've found here, okay? Only monotheism has that. So this limits us to consider the monotheistic religions of the world, of which there are not very many, okay? What's the reason why there aren't many monotheistic religions in the world? Think historically. Why would that be the case?
I mean, because mainly people that think about that point, they will hike on the very thing they worship that it was like that first years. Christianity came along and it was just one God.
Yeah, so before Christianity, you really did not have much monotheism. Pretty much the entire world was polytheistic. Now, I'm sure you could find some random tribes here or there that had some view of what we might call a monotheistic God. Okay, how much impact did they have? How much influence did they have? Right? What?
Abraham had one God.
Right, no, we're going to get to that. Exactly.
He wasn't Christian.
He had the faith of a Christian. So we're using that in a colloquial sense. Yes?
But I would say Judaism.
We'll talk about Judaism in a second, yes. Did you have something, Carrie?
Yeah, so when you talk about like monotheism and could you have like deities? Because I know some religions they have like God and they have like different deities that aren't necessarily God.
It depends on how they're defining deities. You can have other spiritual beings. The Christian worldview has other spiritual beings, but they are not on the level of God. They are demons, right? And I think we often limit demon in our minds. Like, demons are spiritual beings. They are very powerful, right? The Old Testament talks about demons, and even the New Testament talks about them being princes of certain nations, right? They fought spiritual battles. Like, these are powerful beings. If a human saw them, they could absolutely think they are a god, right? And again, like I said, this is how Justin Martyr, one of the first Christian apologists, defended the Christian faith by saying, you accuse us of being atheists because we don't believe in these gods. We actually do believe in them, but we believe they're all demons and that there is one God above them, right, who they are in rebellion against, and they have deceived you into believing that they are gods. So monotheism I am defining as one singular creator, transcendent, self-existent God. Now, like we said, before Christ, the world was dominated by polytheism, with the only notable exception being that of the Jews. Okay? And it was the advent of Christianity that brought monotheism to the world. Right? So most monotheistic religions came well after Christianity. Islam was formed 600 years after Christ. I believe it was 623-ish when Muhammad said he got his revelation from Gabriel. So 600 years. That's well after these. That's after Constantine. That's after the Nicaea. That's after many of the great Christian theologians we can think of. It's after most of the early church fathers, right? Christianity is well established at that point. This is not two rival budding religions, right? One is clearly established. What's another monotheistic religion? Mormon. 1,800 years after Christianity got started, okay? Jehovah's Witnesses, same thing. I think a little bit later than Mormons, actually. All right? They're formed 1,800 years after Christianity, and they also change key Christian doctrines just like Islam does, right? So any other kind of monotheistic religion is either a Christian cult, meaning it's very small, like Branch Davidians or something like that, or it is so insignificant that it has made no impact. Okay? But if most monotheistic religions came after Christianity, and they are claiming Christianity got stuff wrong, which is what all of them do, they have to, that places them under suspicion, because why would we trust a God who couldn't keep his word from corruption? Islam requires that we believe in a God that couldn't keep the law of Moses from being corrupted, couldn't keep the Psalms of David from being corrupted, and couldn't keep the Gospels of Jesus Christ from being corrupted. The Quran was the first time he got it right. He failed 3 times, right? Mormons, they'll say the Bible was corrupted and that the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Treasure, they all help correct the interpretation, right? Jehovah's Witnesses have their own translation of the Bible called the New World Translation. And they also have Watchtower magazines that help, that give further revelation from God in their mind, right? They all deny key Christian doctrines, and they all change Christian texts, meaning scriptures. They all change the Christian scriptures, okay? Which means that they have to say God couldn't stop it from getting corrupted earlier, or he just allowed it to be corrupted. In which case, why? Why did he allow that to be corrupted for that long? So this eliminates most other monotheistic religions, and it leaves us with 2, Judaism and Christianity, okay? Now, it's common for Christians to think that modern Judaism is just the religion of the Old Testament. It's like, oh, they just don't believe in the New Testament. They're just following the Old Testament, right? That is not true. Modern Judaism is not Old Testament Judaism. Modern Judaism is a departure from that religion, and this is large part due to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, right? The temple, the tabernacle, was central to the Old Testament Jewish religion. It was central. You really couldn't have it without that. Now, there was a time in the exile when you did have it, but they were scattered, and it was a time of distress because they couldn't practice their religion until they came back and rebuilt the temple, right? Modern Judaism has kept the Old Testament. That is true. But it interprets the Old Testament through a series of rabbinic traditions called the Talmud. And the Talmud is claimed to be a collection of oral traditions dating back to Moses even, that were written down in the 3rd century AD. So even here, we have a post-Christian sacred text. Now, it's much sooner than all the other ones, but still, it is post-Christian, right? Christianity is the only monotheistic religion that did not change any aspect of the religion it came out of. It did not change a word of the Old Testament. Not a word. It didn't have to go back and say, well, Moses got this wrong. Well, David must have corrupted these Psalms. Well, the prophets could. No, it says, look, they got it all right. And we are presenting you the fulfillment of those prophecies in the person of Jesus Christ. Okay? We take the Hebrew Old Testament in its entirety as a divine revelation from God. And then we say, and here's the rest of it, which is the New Testament, right? And there's more arguments behind why Christianity is true and Judaism is false. Again, I'm talking about Judaism. I'm not talking about Jews in general as people, right? There are plenty of Christian Jews. Christianity was founded by Jews, right? The early church is all Jewish, right? I'm talking about Judaism, the belief system. And by the way, Judaism is the most Christ-hating religion on the planet. It is. Every other religion is either neutral on Jesus or will say something nice about him. Muslims at least say he was a prophet. Hindus might add him to their, not pantheon, but what do you call it? Buddhists might at least say he was a wise teacher. The Talmud states that Jesus is in hell, boiling in a pit of feces. There is no other religion that's even close to hating Jesus as much as Judaism does. Okay? So just for some perspective. Okay? Jews need the gospel. They are not halfway Christians. Right? They believe really terrible things about Jesus, and we need to bring the good news to them. So, this means you're left with a few options. One, Christianity is the true religion. Right? You have to say Christianity is the true religion, or the true religion has yet to be discovered or developed, or God is just choosing to not reveal himself to humanity. Those are really your only three options. Either Christianity, it's something that doesn't exist yet or is so small we don't know it exists yet, or God just doesn't want to talk to us at all. Okay? The last two options are possible, but they are based on empty assertions. Right? So anyone who takes this position needs to bring proof that they are correct. Bring proof that Christianity, the system of thought, is inconsistent. Right? Bring proof that there's some way that God would not want us to know about him, which is very odd considering religion is a universal thing, right? Everyone's trying to get to know God in some sense. So either go to Christianity, which has a wealth of knowledge and rational defenses of the faith, or you flee into obscure skepticism because you simply don't want to submit to Christ. But just to go that extra mile, Christianity has had a greater impact on the world than any other religion. I should say greater positive impact on the world. Because you can have an impact on the world and that'd be really bad, right? It has a greater positive impact on the world than any other religion, okay? Everything from science to education to politics to medicine to hospitality to family life to societal structure, all of it comes out of Christianity. Nothing else comes close. Now, on its own, this point on its own is not a sufficient reason for why Christianity is true. I acknowledge that, right? This is not enough. Things can have positive impacts that aren't true, okay? But if Christianity is true, if it is the religion of the true God, we would expect this. We would expect it to be the most positive force in the world, and it has been. So that is where we'll close out this portion of the apologetics series. And if we are meeting next week, then we'll talk about natural revelation. If we aren't, I will see you in 2 weeks and we'll talk about it then.